Pete, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Super excited to have you on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a Leo. I'm about 5'9", gray hair.
I'm a Leo too. Two Leos. Let's go.
It sounded like I was getting ready to do my Hinge profile. No, I am. No, nice to meet you, Mike. And I appreciate your having me on. And for the listeners out there, I really appreciate the fact that you're going to be sharing a little bit of your time with me today. So hopefully, make it worth your while. But no, background is I'm a personal trainer. I consider myself a personal trainer. That's just how I started in the fitness industry. And from there, I've been a strength coach. Then I evolved a number of years ago into being an educator. So primarily for a number of years, I worked with the American Council on Exercise, National Academy of Sports Medicine as an education consultant, creating education content for them. And I've also worked as a global master trainer for Nautilus and Stairmaster. So prior to, from about 2014 to 2020, I had a really sweet gig where I did a lot of international travel representing Nautilus and Stairmaster at various events and working with health club companies overseas. Because I don't know how many people realize, but the fitness markets overseas, the health club markets in places like Brazil, Mexico, and China are blowing up just like they are here in the States. And so I was fortunate enough to be with a company that trusted me to send me over there to educate trainers on how to use their products. So I've been doing fitness education almost exclusively for the better part of 16 years now. And that's where, I saw there are certain needs back there. So yeah, my history I started as a personal trainer. I'm also a certified strength coach, and just really, I'm a fitness geek, man. I love studying fitness. I love doing fitness. I love coaching fitness. I love helping others learn how to do fitness. It's a silly belief, I think, but this has been my driving, my own personal vision for the last 20 years. And that's, I just want to help the world be a better place through exercise and fitness.
I love it, man. That's cool. Okay. So talk to me. What got you started in the world of physical preparation, personal training? Like, what got you started down this path?
Honestly, 80s movies. 80s movies.
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm a 51-year-old Gen Xer. I grew up in the 80s. You had Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme. You had Sylvester Stallone. You had guys with huge muscles kicking ass and getting all the girls. So who wouldn't want to do that? So as a 15, 16-year-old in 1987, 1988, that's when I started. I went to start the local YMCA and then ended up getting a job at a Bally's for my senior year in high school. Just basically I had no idea what I was doing. This was 1990 and the fitness industry was just brand new. You had health clubs, but really there was no education. There was nothing out there. So yeah, that's how I got. I mean, honestly, I was just motivated. I wanted to be like Arnold. I wanted to be like all the movie stars with big muscles and able to kick ass.
Yeah. I feel like that's so many of us, right? Like if you're cut out of that generation, I mean, exactly. I just remember seeing Conan the Barbarian. I'm like, who is this guy? He is jacked out of his mind. He swings a sword and I don't know. Like that was it for me.
Dude, on the weekends, you also had WWF wrestling. So, you go to the movies, you see these huge, and think about it. It's funny to go back and watch older movies, like watch movies from the 60s and 70s where the movie stars, they're just people. They did no training. And now you get Chris Pratt, Chris Helmsworth, you get any movie star worth their salt is on a GH and on a total physical prep program in Hollywood. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to see just how those bodies have evolved over 40 or 50 years. But no, I think a lot of people to that point, a lot of people in my generation got started with picking up bodybuilding books. And in fact, this was a new thing, man, for years. I mean, I'm sure you've taught courses too, where you ask people in the course, like, hey, how many of you, what was your first book that you ever read about fitness? Right? Because when you start coaching movement and we start coaching, you want to kind of break away from that bodybuilding paradigm of one muscle at a time.
Sure.
And for years, anytime I asked that question in a workshop, everybody would always raise their hand and say, hey, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. I mean, seriously, that's everybody from my generation. That's how we all got started. Any trainer from my generation over the age of 35 or 40, that's probably the first book they bought.
Yeah.
Last year, I was holding a workshop with a bunch of young trainers in their early 20s. And when I asked the question, this was very insightful to me. When I asked the question, what was the first book you bought? Nobody raised a hand. And one hand went up in the back of the room and was like, hey, why would you buy a book when you can watch YouTube? And really, I mean, really, to me, that really was a big paradigm shift for me, because, for years, people my generation, fitness professionals, my age, I keep using that term, but fitness professionals my age would kind of roll their eyes at YouTube or Instagram or any of these education sources. But there's some really phenomenal content out there on the socials. So it struck me that there's so much more information out there now about how to train. I mean, from podcasts like yours and from resources that you put out, it's really been amazing to see just how the whole, I guess, approach to fitness has evolved over the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and it's something that I talked about in a show here recently. People asked why I'm investing that time into creating YouTube videos, and I've done it for a long time, but really diving into it now, it's exactly like you alluded to, right? Kids aren't going and picking up Arnold's bodybuilding encyclopedia anymore, right? They're like, oh, I want to figure out how to row. I'm going to go to YouTube. Or how do I squat more effectively? I'm going to go to YouTube. So hopefully a couple of those kids find their way to, my ecosystem and learner thing or two. So that's great.
Well, and that's it for any educator out there. And I'm getting ready to, I think for next year, for 2024, I'll be looking at how do I kind of relaunch my YouTube channel, because I was doing that with my podcast. I've had a podcast and a YouTube channel for a while, and I put that on hold with my current job. But the thing about YouTube is that content sits out there. It's static. It sits there. And even if the video is 5, 6, 8 years old, I mean, look, we all know the science is a science. Type 2 muscle fiber, we might learn a little bit more about it. But, something from 7, 8 years ago is going to be pretty much applicable today. So I think that's a great strategy.
Absolutely.
And it's like I kind of question, why do I invest the time to write books when people are just – it's a lot easier, I think, to set up a recording setup and then do a little YouTube than to spend the time it takes to research and write a book.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, there's still value in it, right? And sometimes the value is as much for you as the reader, just streamlining and organizing those thoughts. So, okay, one other topic here before we dive in. I'd love to hear about your career path because, like you said, you've kind of bounced around, you've had numerous gigs, and you're in a new role now. So I would just love to hear about your career and kind of what you're doing today.
Honestly, my tagline is my job is I make half naked people sweaty, or at least I did for a long time. I would joke about that. Or people would ask me what I do. I make half naked people sweaty. And now I teach others how to do that. So to go into the career timeline, in the early 2000s, I was a personal trainer in Washington, D.C. for a health club company that was growing pretty rapidly. And at some point I became an educator for them. And really that's when I first got hooked up with NASM, it was back in 2002. I became an educator for NASM within the health club, and that really started me on my journey. I got a master's degree and then went to work as a director of education for one health club company. We had 6 health clubs around the country in premium locations. We had 2 clubs in Four Seasons hotels and 2 clubs in Ritz-Carlton hotels. So that was the level. We're a premium level.
Okay.
Equinox bought. I left that company a number of years ago, and Equinox bought them back in 2014. But from there, I went to the American Council on Exercise. So I got hired as an education content creator for EōS, and because they wanted somebody who understood the health club market. So for 5 years, I worked for EōS, and really one of my big wins there was helping create the IFT model that we used to teach, or that EōS used to teach trainers program design. And in all honesty, all it was based on the Soviet system. I mean, if people are familiar with the Soviet, 5 stages up to mastery.
Yeah.
Same basic concept. I mean, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was just giving EōS a way to kind of systemize training and program design. But from EōS, I left EōS in 2013 to go freelance and be able to do different odd jobs. Part of it was I had a young kid and wanted to be my ex-wife worked in law enforcement or works in law enforcement. And, I wanted to be able to stay at home, and be able to help take care of the kid. I was doing some personal training and was looking to open a training studio when we found out kid number 2 was coming along. And anybody out there who's opened a training studio or run a training studio with 2 young kids, I made the decision to pull away. What I did not want to do was be a studio owner with 2 kids under the age of 3, or try to launch a studio in the first year. At the same time, my second kid was being born when both kids are under the age of 3. So I stepped away from the studio project and just really doubled down on education and content creation. And that was about when I got hooked up with Nautilus and Stairmaster, and just really doubled down and just, was their primary educator. But along the line, and this is, to me, one of my big career highlights is really having had the opportunity to create content for both EōS and NASM and Nautilus. So it's really been, I've really had the fortune of being able to work with some of the top brands and with some of the top companies in the industry. And that resulted in a couple of years ago, I got hired in 2021 I got hired by EōS Fitness, which is we're a chain of 6 health clubs with locations in Florida, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and where I am in Southern California. And to be honest, man, if you stepped in one of our gyms, it would look like when I was in our Orlando location last year, I thought I was walking into an NCAA training facility. I mean, we have in some of our bigger locations, we have 2 field turf areas. We have training sleds. Our standard setup is about 10 Olympic platforms in our gyms now. Some of our larger gyms, we're going to 15 and 20 platforms because our platforms are, like I said, the fitness in the last 5 to 10 years, especially, people, because of social media and because of YouTube, you now see people in the gym doing programs that elite athletes weren't doing 14, 15 years ago.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I never saw it wasn't until the mid 20 teens when Olympic platforms started showing up in commercial health clubs. And really what we do is we just create a space where people work out. We make fitness affordable, we make it accessible, and we have really killer equipment. And so my job as director of education is I try to help coach up our trainers so they know that how to use the equipment we have and know how to engage the clients that come into our facilities.
Wow. That sounds sick, man. I need to check one of these out. Not necessarily, I'd have to travel to find one, but still, that sounds awesome.
Hey, the next time we're in Phoenix, we're in Las Vegas. So next time you're out in Vegas or next time you're in Phoenix, or we're growing in Miami, we're growing in Tampa, we are growing in Southern California. Actually, it's kind of funny. We're opening one in Fullerton near Andy Galpin's college. Fullerton. So I haven't figured out how to tap into that yet, to tap into that market. But anytime. And it goes for anybody listening. If you are in one of our markets and you really want to find a cool big box gym. Now, I will say that we're crowded. I mean, we get busy because we're affordable. But I mean, like I said, we have Olympic platforms. A lot of our gyms have outdoor spaces. A lot of our gyms have field turf areas. So if you're looking for a gym with a place to move and with weight that you can lift, look at EōS Fitness, especially. Obviously you don't want to commute from outside of state. But
no, but it sounds like an awesome setup. So. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying it's fun. It's a different application of the science, right? It's like it's one thing when you're working with athletes. The only thing is when you're working with athletes, you have very specific metrics that you can see them get better or you see them not get better. And with trainers, it's kind of the same way. Like I said, I look at my trainers and my athletes and like, all right, where do we need to, or how do we coach them up? Where do we need to get them better?
Yeah, I love it, man. Okay, so seemingly in a different path because you just wrote an entire book on recovery, which I want to talk to you about because that's really what I'm most interested in talking to you about today is this idea of recovery. And let's just start with the basics here. Like what got you interested in this topic to begin with?
Okay. Good question. My athletic background is in rugby. I started playing, I grew up in the Washington DC area. And so as a young kid, I'd be down on the mall on the weekends and there were fields down the mall. And I'd see these guys playing this sport that just, you ran around, you hit people, you tackled people. And I'm like, that looked like fun. And it wasn't until I got to college and my college didn't have a rugby team, but I did a semester abroad in London and watched a heck of a lot of rugby on. And this was the early 90s. It was 1993. And it was right as rugby wasn't professional in the UK until the early 90s. And so I was watching it on TV and really was like, man, that looks like a fun sport. Graduated college in 1994. And I'm like, I need something to do. I'd played a little bit. Let me put it this way. I was on the football team in college. I realized I wasn't going to get much playing time. So I was a Division III team. But I realized that, afterwards, after college, I wanted a way to stay fit, stay active and meet people. So I started playing club rugby in Washington, D.C. And that really became the focus. I was actually working on politics. I didn't graduate. My degree's in political science and economics. So I was doing political stuff in D.C. and playing rugby when that's how I got interested more into fitness. Was I started, and that starts the journey because as a rugby player, 24, 25 years old and working in politics in DC, you don't make a lot of money. And so I was working, I got a job as a part-time at a front desk of a gym to get a free membership. I needed a place to train for rugby. And I figured by working the front desk at a gym, 2 things. One, it'd be a great way to meet women checking into the gym. That worked. Well, especially because the gym was in a relatively gay neighborhood. So the odds were stacked in my favor. That was a very strategic move on my part. But I figured I'd work part-time at the front desk to meet people, as a young 20-something, but also to get a free membership. And that's really where I learned, Mike. I had no idea how to be a personal trainer. I had no idea that you can make a career in personal training. And it was 1998 when I started working part-time at the front desk and still playing rugby, and was just like, anyway, that's how I got started the fitness career. But as a rugby player, I was always researching. I read BOMPA's periodization back in the late 90s, right as I got certified by EōS. I like to say I got certified by EōS in 1998, and I went to work for EōS in 2008. So it took me 10 years of kind of going through that arc to get there. But I started reading everything I could about performance training, especially for rugby. I mean, my goal was to play at the elite level. I never made it to the national team, but I did play in the Super League back in the early 2000s, which we were out of DC. So we played teams in Chicago, New York, Philly. I mean, we literally traveled around the country. And so we were the precursor to a professional league that now you have Major League Rugby, which I think is getting ready to kick off its 6th year of professional rugby in the States. But I was in that generation of, and I played front row. I was a hooker in the scrum. So we used to call it in, calling our own scrums in. But that's just really where I started trying to read and learn as much as I could about fitness preparation. And I think it was probably in the early 2000s, maybe 2004, 2005. It was before that. It was 2003. I saw Mel Siff speak, and I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Mel Siff. He passed away a number of years ago, but he wrote a great book called Super Training. That he was a South African mathematician, and if you want to understand anything about physical preparation in sports, Super Training would be the book to pick up. It's based on the Soviet method. It was Verkhoshansky's work, and I'm not pronouncing the name correctly. But Siff pretty much went through and interpreted the Soviet methodology, and the Soviets really made an emphasis on recovery. And when you look at it, and in college, in the early 90s, I actually was an international relations major, and so I had studied the Soviet Union from a political standpoint. And in the Soviet Union, whether you were a worker, whether you were a soldier, whether you're an athlete, whether you were a dancer for the ballet company, you belonged to the state. So back in the 50s and 60s, the Soviet researchers were looking at physical performance in a much different way than we were out here in the West. And the Soviets realized that it was better for their athletes to be slightly underprepared for competition and to be rested for competition than to show up and train the day before a competition. So that really struck with me. It was like, okay, here's the system, a governmental system that put all of its resources into understanding physiology to how to optimize human performance. And they really made an emphasis on rest, recovery, meditation, visualization is where we get. I mean, look, if we apply plyometric training, the Soviets, Soviet methodology. I mean, that really is. It wasn't Verkhoshansky. It was someone else. Maybe it was Verkhoshansky. It
was Verkhoshansky.
Yeah. I did the. And Zatsiorsky is the other one I was thinking of, because that was another that's another influential book in my career was Serious Strength Training by Zatsiorsky and Kramer, because again, they go through the Soviet methodology. But that really was it. I mean, that was it, Mike, was looking at, was understanding that the Soviets made recovery a key component of their training methodology. And then that was 04, 05 when I started reading his Super Training. And I went to work at the American Council on Exercise in 08. And that was right as CrossFit was starting to blow up, right? It was 08, 09, CrossFit was starting to blow up. So it was about 2010 maybe when I realized that everybody was talking about high intensity training, but nobody was talking about what to do after it. So that's when I developed a lecture that I started delivering at IDEA conferences called Recovery, the Forgotten Training Variable. And at that time, one of the early pieces of research literature published on recovery was by Eric Bishop, I believe, was maybe the early to mid 2000s. Was one of the first researchers who really did a comprehensive review of the need for recovery. So starting in about 2010, 2011 is when I started reading the research. I would prepare talks, give conferences, write articles, write blog posts. And really the goal was to help personal trainers understand that if you are going to use high intensity exercise, and we know there are tremendous benefits from high intensity exercise, if you are going to use it, understand how to program the recovery so it has the desired effect for adaptation.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer. So when we start talking about training, right, we've got kind of our big rocks, like maybe you believe in compound lifts and, high intensity followed by low intensity days. There's certain principles that we all adhere to, right? Or things that we can kind of hang our hat on. When you're starting to talk to somebody about recovery, what are some of your big rocks or some of your key principles that you like to focus on?
Honestly, it comes back to BOMPA and again, the Soviet methodology, periodization. Periodization, and just really, it's like one of the big questions I always ask, when I'm in a room full of trainers is, just because you can does not mean you should. Or that's one of the big points, is just because you can does not mean you should. Can you train at a high intensity every day? Yeah, you can. But you have to understand that you deplete glycogen, you deplete your body of its energy resources. And if you train hard 2 or 3 days in a row, there's no chance for glycogen replenishment. And so you're going to be burning protein, burning amino acids, going into gluconeogenesis. So it really was just trying to raise that awareness of like, hey, if you're programming the workout, understand what to do for recovery. And the question was like, what is my preferred method? My preferred method is just like alternating workouts, is following an undulating model. Like obviously right now, personally, I'm not training for anything. So my personal workouts are more on an undulating model, whereas, step or linear periodization would be probably a much better way to go for somebody training for a specific competition. But the way I understand periodization is it exploits the recovery. The whole point of periodization is to design the workouts to optimize rest periods between workouts, and then to do lower intensity workouts between high intensity workouts to allow the body to rest and recover. So all that to say, my favorite method of recovery is basically a low intensity body weight mobility workout, which I find very ironic now that now that like mobility is like the biggest trend on Instagram right now. We're recording this in the fall of 2023, and mobility is like one of these huge trends. It's like, those of us who have been doing this for a while, yeah, this is nothing new. I just don't have an Instagram hashtag to promote it. But it really is. I think my preferred methodology for recovery is a low intensity mobility workout, and then the good old fashioned sleep. Just getting more sleep.
Yeah, I love it, man. Yeah, go back in the archives. Eric Cressy and myself dropped a DVD called Magnificent Mobility in 2006.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Mobility's been around for a minute, friends, just because, there's better looking people and cooler ways to demo it. Hey, man, go back and look at those photos. Eric and I both had a lot more hair back then. But
if you look at it, I mean, from that was time, it was probably an evolution of Verstegen's movement preparation. I mean, because Verstegen in the early 2000s, and see, the thing is, I mean, we've been in the industry about the same amount of time, because I saw that you went to Ball State and graduated with your MS in 2000, in the early 2000s.
Yeah, 2002.
So we've both been on this ride about, we've seen, look at how high school athletes are training now. In 2002, when I was a personal trainer in DC, you just graduated from the master's degree, there really was not much emphasis placed on high school sports development. Now, if I walk into any high school, any decent high school in the country, you're going to have Olympic platforms. The larger high schools will have a strength coach there. I mean, we've seen this huge change just in the 20 years of our careers.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. Every high school near me, worth its salt, their weight room for their high school now is far superior to the one we had at Ball State, which was a Division I university.
Oh, I believe it. No, I'd 100% believe it because we know so much more about the need for fitness. And as a result, over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been a lot more research on recovery. I mean, like I said, when I first started looking in this topic about 12, 13 years ago, there was I couldn't find that many sources, that many published peer-reviewed sources on recovery. And in fact, there was some debate on the need for recovery. I remember there were 1 or 2 research studies I read where there's some debate on the need. There's no need for this. The regular rest is all we need to do. I can't remember which document that was, but I remember reading that and and now there's a much different mindset.
Absolutely. So one thing you mentioned was sleep. And obviously sleep is a huge component of just general health and well-being, but obviously recovery as well. Here's the thing though. Everybody knows they should sleep more. How do you go about getting people to actually do it?
If I knew how to do it, that's my goal. I'm trying to sleep more, right? I mean, my goal, literally, my goal is I try to get to bed around 10 and I hope to be asleep by 11, right? And I'm trying to get in bed, do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of winding down. And I think the interesting thing, I was actually listening to a news podcast this morning that made the statement that they're showing that the research is showing apps like what's the dining app, like Resy and other apps where you make reservations are showing that people are making earlier and earlier reservations. So a big trend around the country is earlier reservations. And the hosts on this podcast were hypothesizing that might be a result of Andrew Huberman talking about the need for sleep and recovery in his podcast, that there's a much greater awareness now of the need for sleep. And I think you have Matthew Sinclair, the doctor out of Australia who wrote a book on sleep, who I know is I think he does a podcast too on sleep. There's a lot more resources on it now. And I think people are discovering that if you get to bed a half hour earlier, you feel much better the next day. And 2 years ago, no, was it 2 years ago? Yeah, two or 3 years ago, I interviewed Dr. Craig Heller from Stanford for my podcast, and he studies sleep, and he made the point that if you sleep an extra hour a night, that's like sleeping an entire extra night during the course of a week. And it really is. And who did I see lecture? It was a doctor. I want to say Brandon. Oh, I'm blanking on his last name. Skinny dude with glasses, does a lot of research on recovery. But I remember he went through. I was in one of his lectures, and he showed two athletes with the same training volume. One athlete slept 6 hours a night, and the other athlete slept 8 hours a night. And the athlete that slept longer had greater performance. So it was just, when you see data like that, and when you start tracking your sleep, I think people start realizing that, wow, this is the one performance thing that I can really do. I'm already doing it. It doesn't cost anything. The only thing I maybe need to do is shut down my TV and get off my screens earlier, because they do keep you awake. And that's one of the things I did. I have two kids. My kids I started late. My kids are in elementary school. And in order to set the example of trying to minimize their screen time, I got rid of my TV. So I do watch an iPad. I do watch a phone. So I'm not going to say I'm like, oh yeah,
screen
I'm better.
Free.
Yeah, no, I'm not at all. But I had this stupid, ridiculous, oversized TV that I'm like, why am I watching this thing at night? Because it's not good for me. And so I got rid of it. And I did it also to set the example for my kids of like, hey, screen time is not good for us. I'm getting rid of my TV. Therefore, when I come at you for putting down your iPads, I have a little bit more validity there. I'm doing it from a position of leadership and not just doing it because I say to do it.
Yeah, I love it. We'll talk about trends that have come full circle. So Bill and I opened our gym in 2008. And so when you open a gym, you're working split shifts, right? Like, you're there at 5:45, 6, and you're there till 7 p.m., 8 p.m. And I just remember every morning I'd get up, and I had a lot of at the time, Twitter was still a thing and very cool. And I had a lot of news people that I followed because I was trying to get in with media people. Hey, come check out our gym, create a buzz. And one of the most popular hashtags at this point in time was hashtag Team No Sleep. Because these newscasters, they're up at 2 a.m. to, be at the office at 3 or 4, makeup, all that. They're on at 5. And I was like, yeah. Everybody's like, oh yeah, we don't need to sleep. Let's grind. So think about that emphasis and that shift in the last 10 to 15 years from Team No Sleep to, hey man, I'm trying to be in bed at 9:30. How can we pull this off? Well, no, you're 100% right, because a friend of mine, Rick Ritchie, who's an educator for NASM, he had opened a recovery studio in New York City in maybe 2016 or 2017. He ended up shutting it down during 2020 when New York City basically shut down. But when I visited him, was it 2018? I can forget when I was in his studio, maybe 2018 or 2019. But he said most of his clients were not athletes. They were Wall Street hedge fund and investment people because they were there. They're recovering from the stress of their job. They weren't necessarily recovering from the training. They were there to do the oxygen chamber, to do the decompression chamber, to do the IR sauna because of the high performance stress, because of the stress required for their job. And I think that's one of the better things we have so much deeper understanding of is the fact that all stress accumulates, and sleep is really one of the best ways to mitigate stress, whether it's physical from training or emotional, mental from other things that we might go through. I love it. One of the other things I think that's great now that we didn't have 15 years ago, or at least the technology is so much better, is the wearables and the ability to track some of this stuff, whether it's a Garmin, an Oura Ring, Morpheus. I don't even know what else is out there because I'm sure there's 1,000 of them. But there's so many cool tools out there now to help really make you aware of, oh, wow, I slept 6 hours last night. You can see my resting heart rate is up. My HRV is down. Oh, subjectively, I'm in a pissy mood today. All those things really help you understand your body a little bit better and see some of the impact that, lack of sleep could potentially be having on you.
And think about that, because I'm sure you're probably the same thing of where, you realize that at some point that you're probably burning the candle on both ends, as you said, open up your gym. But then it's as soon as you start going to bed a little bit earlier, as soon as you start getting that extra half an hour, extra 45 minutes of sleep, and you're like, oh my goodness, why did I not do this sooner?
Right. Absolutely.
You would have talked performance drugs, man. Go to bed an hour and a half earlier at night. And I'm not going to spend $1,000 a month on TRT. I'm just going to sleep more. I'm going to, eat some higher fat, at 51 years old, I'm always looking for how do I up my T levels, right? I can eat different things and get more sleep. And I'm not going to go on, I'm waiting till my kids I have 2 daughters. So I'm waiting until they hit high school before I hit any TRT. Especially with my younger daughter. My younger daughter's going to be a handful. So.
Oh yeah, you got it. It's like the ace in the back pocket, right? When you need it, you can pull it out.
100%. Yeah.
Not before. I like it. Okay, so something else that you mentioned, and I think this is really valuable, is this concept of structuring your workload, structuring your workout, structuring your training week to better accommodate recovery. So could you dive into that just a little bit more, how you might go about doing that? Because I think a lot of people hopefully understand this concept, but there's probably others too that are new to this, right? Young trainers that are just thinking, oh yeah, we're going to squat this day and deadlift this day. So how do you go about structuring workouts maybe over a week to help people better recover and make sure they're getting the most out of the training sessions they do get it?
That's a great question. And it really is, trial and error. Like I said, I worked in Washington, D.C. as a personal trainer. And what I realized early on, I mean, if anybody, this was back in the days when Congress has never been 100% functioning, but this is back in the days when government was somewhat functioning in the early 2000s. Everybody was on the same page after 9/11. And in D.C., the federal budget ends on September 30th and the new one starts on October 1. So the 2 busiest times in DC are like between April and June when they're writing the budget, and then between like maybe late August to late September when everybody's trying to spend all the money so they get the money back for next year's budget.
Right.
Your federal government at work, folks. But so those are like the 2 busiest periods, and then you combine in there the holiday period. But I noticed that when my clients got busier in their schedules, that's when I would drop down, and they didn't have as much time to get to the gym. So that's when I started structuring and doing more body weight workouts and less high intensity workouts, just because it made sense. And this was before I even really started understanding the science about research and recovery. It just made sense to me that, hey, you have a lot more going on at work. You don't need to kill yourself at the gym. Just get here and do something, and doing something is better than nothing. And so what I try to get people thinking about, and this is really what I mean by people as trainers, when I would lecture to trainers, it's like one of the first things you should do when you work with, if you're a new client, one of the first things I'm going to do, Mike, is when are the busiest times of your year? Because as a trainer, I don't want just to work with you for 3 months. I want to work with you for a long time. So I'm going to start with the big picture and be like, all right, Mike, do me a favor. Tell me your busiest times of year. When are the times of year that whether it's work, whether it's family stuff, when you know that your time is limited? Okay, great. Those are your active recovery times, right? Those are, like if you know that December is just jacked for you because you got kids, you got holiday stuff, well, fine. December is now going to become your off-season transition period, right? So that way, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, I'm not going to emphasize a lot of physical development. It's going to be much more of a, let's work on mobility. Let's work on just maintenance. Let's do workouts that you can get done in 20 or 30 minutes. You won't have a lot of time for the gym. And then maybe you're an executive and maybe you have budget time you're on a fiscal year, you're on a January 1 fiscal. So you're making your budget now in like the September, October timeframe. You might have busier time then. You might be doing more work or you might have more meetings. Well, that would be another time we're like, all right, well, let's ratchet down the high intensity exercise because you're going to have more stress at work. And let's talk about, like, can we add meditation? Can we add yoga to your workout? Because it's not about, and that's the message that's really important. I think the message is getting out there because recovery is not about not exercising. Recovery is just about changing the intensity and volume of exercise so you're not overstressing the system. You're not overstressing the body. And that really is the key. It's talking with clients, just being like, hey, look, whenever you have a high stress period, let's drop down. Don't not exercise, but maybe go for a 30-minute walk instead of going to the gym for that HIIT workout, right? Or maybe try to get 5 to 10 minutes of meditation in there at certain points during the day, just to keep your mind right and to keep everything working the right way. And that really is, those are practical ways of looking at recovery for people that are non-athletes. But then if you're working with like those people that, like when I've worked with clients who are runners, like in DC, you had the Cherry Blossom 10 miler in the spring and you had the Marine Corps Marathon in the fall. And so I would have clients train for both races and it would just be structuring their workouts along with other things. It becomes mindful. I look at as a trainer, as a coach, you got to kind of look at all, I look at athletes and what are all the stressors we deal with in life? You have your physical stress from the sport and from training. You have, stuff going on at home. You have stuff going on at work. And our job as coaches is to say, okay, your stress level might be getting a little bit high here. We don't have anything coming up right now. You're not competing for a playoff. You're not, you're in maybe mid-season. We can back off your intensity a little bit now to mitigate this other stress, this other stressor. Right. When that other stressor now lowers, now you can increase that intensity of exercise again. That really, I think, is key for really coaches to understand that our job in programming is to really look at how do we mitigate the stress response for our clients.
Dude, that's brilliant. And I'll be honest, I've never heard of somebody doing that so proactively, right? We do that with athletes, like, hey, from November to April, you're in season. So we back off our training stress because your competition stress is going to be through the roof. And sometimes I think we do it reactively with our Gen Pop clients, right? Like somebody comes in and they just look like a hot mess. They're not going to have a good session. Oh man, we better, do some recovery, foam rolling, mobility. But I really like that idea of being proactive about it and asking them up front, when are your stressful times so I can plan around that? I love that. The other part that I love too is this idea of, hey, just because we're going to have like a period of, I don't want to call it detraining, but more maintenance. It's not about doing nothing, right? But we're going to do that 20 to 30 minutes of things that are lower stress, maybe lower impact. They're not going to stress your body as much, but it's keeping that consistency up, right? Because as well as I do, it's that habit. Yeah. Don't lose that habit muscle of going to the gym, doing these things regularly. So I love that message of, hey, look, just because we're backing off, that doesn't mean we're stopping training.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we can all benefit from, right? If you train Gen Pop clients, letting them know, hey, stressful period, I get it. We can back off in the gym, but that doesn't mean we cut it off altogether.
And that's a great, and dude, that's the right message. And two, it's looking at it. It's like, I always look at stress mitigation, and I just forgot the point I was going to make. That's the hard part about having been a rugby player and getting a lot of concussions in my early 20s is it sometimes pops up. But really, when you look at Gen Pop, it really is a matter of just understanding where are the stressors, how do we mitigate their stressors, and it really is looking at, hey, if you're doing too much of any one thing, it's not going to be good for your health and not going to be good for your body. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing now is we're getting a balance of, we're getting a much better understanding of that, right? Oh, that's where I was going. I was going to go with functional overreaching. See, I knew if I thought about it for a second, it'd come back to me. But when you look at functional overreaching for sport, you might do a functional overreach, maybe 5 to 10 days before the start of a season or a competition to push the body and then to kind of back off a little bit. And so what I started doing with clients too, if a client went on vacation, we'd push it hard for the week or two before they went on vacation. And I would say, just enjoy vacation. This is now going to be your rest and recovery period, right? And we're going to push you a little bit harder. And that was really before I really understood what the whole, purpose of a functional overreach was. It just made sense as you're getting ready for a vacation. There's one client I had for you. It's funny because she was going on this vacation and she was one of these little chatterboxes. And she had told me she wanted to wear this one specific bikini on her vacation. That's why she was training. So anytime she started chit-chatting, all I had to say was bikini, and she would shut up and get back to work. I'd be like, I don't want to, no, the bikini. We need to train for your bikini. Okay. Yeah, right. But that's an example of pushing somebody, pushing them hard, and then saying, hey, look, on vacation, wear your bikini, drink your drinks, have some fun, and we'll pick up training when you get back. It's applying that, because that's the thing, having been an athlete, and I've worked with some athletes over the years, but really I've worked primarily with Gen Pop, and it's a matter of, I would always apply the same methodology. And I would tell them that, like, look, I'm going to train you the same way that an elite athlete trains, not the same volume and intensity, but with the same methodology and the same approach. And that's that's where I just ended up getting, a lot of my clients ended up being attorneys. They were executives in the DC area because they appreciated that and they stayed with me for years. The only reason why I left that was just to move on in my education career.
Yeah, I love it, man. Okay, one more big topic here, and then we'll start to wrap up. One thing I know you and I are both passionate about is this idea of workouts as we age, right? Longevity is a very hot buzzword in our industry, arguably the biggest right now, right? Like, we can talk about mobility or high intensity or zone 2 cardio. Longevity is one of the hottest buzzwords. So when you're thinking about workouts for longevity, what are you emphasizing?
That's actually the topic of my second book. My second book is Ageless Intensity, High Intensity Workouts to slow the aging process. And that really was both these books kind of, and here's a little secret, and it's kind of like, now that these books are published, I can say this. Starting in about maybe 2015, 2016, I started having the ideas for these books. And so I started pitching like EōS, Idea, and other companies I work for on content. And so I got paid to develop that content for them, whether it's an article or a blog. That content also became like workshops. That content became conference lectures. And then all that stuff got rolled up into the books I wrote. So basically I've gotten paid 2 or 3 times on the same content by just building on it over the years. So just for any of you burgeoning, if any coaches out there are thinking about how do I get into the content game, into the speaking game, recycle. Update your references, update the research, but just recycle. But you're right. Longevity is really, because longevity ties into high intensity training. And that's what I realized in going through the research is high intensity training boosts growth hormone. It boosts testosterone. And again, we can thank the Soviets, because the Soviets were the ones that really started measuring that. And what they start doing? Well, let's give our athletes extra testosterone to help them recover quicker.
Right.
And that's where we got that's where we got PEDs from. PEDs are, again, an outcome of the Soviet system. But when you look at longevity, and this becomes a balance, right? Because high intensity exercise activates the type 2 muscle fibers. And that's one of the things I realized in going through the research for ageless intensity is if I'm in my 60s and 70s and I'm walking, I'm doing yoga, maybe I'm doing water aerobics, that's primarily endurance aerobic exercise. There's not a lot of type 2 overload there. So we're not doing any glycogen depletion. So that's going to affect diabetes. That's going to affect whether or not, I can effectively metabolize carbohydrates when I take them in. So I think, looking at that, one of the big things for longevity is strength training and power training, keeping up the activation of the type 2 muscle fibers and keeping them working. Part of it is for function, but also part of it is too for carbohydrate metabolism. And nobody thinks about that. Nobody walks into the gym saying, all right, today's my carbohydrate metabolism day. Because essentially, look, if you're doing a zone 2 workout, if you're doing a 90-minute zone 2 workout, that's primarily fat oxidation. You're going to get some glucose metabolism in there, but it's primarily fat oxidation. But a higher intensity where you get into type 2, the anaerobic training, and you get into depletion, you go into the lactate system, and you go into the glycogen, you go into the ATP-PC system, that really helps the body become more efficient at metabolizing the carbohydrates we eat. And so that's one of the key things that I think for as we age is training with intensity. But as we age, we need more recovery, right? So as we age, you can do a high intensity workout in your 40s and 50s, but whereas you could do maybe a high intensity workout 3 or 4 days a week in your 20s and 30s, now that I'm in my 50s, I maybe do high intensity 2 or 3 days a week. I'll plan for, honestly, I plan for 3 high intensity workouts a week. And I sometimes will scrap one of them just because if I'm not feeling 100%, I back off and I'll still work out, but I just don't do it I don't do a high intensity workout. I just moderate it. And that really is, I think the key for longevity, one is what you said earlier with habits. You're absolutely on the money with that, is have those habits and have those consistency. But with longevity, we need to stress our body with training. We need to activate the type 2 fibers. We need to work on the stretch shorten cycle. Right? We need to keep the fascia healthy, because if we don't work on the stretch shorten cycle, look, Aaron Rodgers, 4 weeks ago was a perfect example. What happens when the amortization phase goes wrong and a tendon doesn't go from lengthening to shortening the right way and it goes snap. Right. And that really is, putting all that together. So to me, longevity is a combination of high intensity strength training, plyometric training, high intensity interval training, but a reasonable amount, a lot of HIIT training. A lot of consumers out there, they get, I'm going to do 30 minutes of HIIT. When you look at the studies on the Tabata protocol, there's one study that came out, published in 2018, and I always love referring to this study. And I'm trying. It began with a G. The study, the primary author, and that's why I'm just trying to remember that. But this study had 3 different groups. 2 of the groups were Tabata groups. One group did bodyweight Tabata, just doing like burpees, jumping jacks, and a couple other bodyweight exercises. The other group did a 4-minute Tabata on a treadmill. So you had 2 Tabata groups, and then you had one group do 30 minutes. They did 30 minutes of moderate intensity work on a treadmill. Each group worked out 3 times a week. And the cool thing about the study is I think it was either 16 or 18 weeks long. It was a longer study. So it was a little, so it was 16 or, it was a 16 or 18 week study. And what they found was the 2 Tabata groups, the people exercising 12 minutes a week, got better results than the people in terms of VO2 and in terms of fat loss than the people training for 90 minutes a week. And that really is, that just kind of puts for those of us that read the research, we understand that. But for the consumers out there, I try to highlight that because it's like, look, HIIT workouts are great, but you don't need more than, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of them, at any given time. And that would be, I say that because in my opinion, and it's just my opinion based on what I've read in the research, is that as we age, especially in our 50s, 60s, and 70s, we should be doing HIIT workouts 2, maybe 3 times a week. But sub 10 minute, to follow the Martin Kabbalah model, sub 10 minute HIIT workouts, right? We don't need to do a slam your face into the wall until grandma pukes. You just need to get your heart rate up and be out of breath for 2 or 3 times a week. That type of stuff put together with sleep, with the proper sleep, with proper nutrition, with proper stress mitigation like meditation. we don't know yet, but that should extend our lifespan. I would imagine 5-10 years at least if we do that stuff.
Absolutely. I love it, man. Okay, my guy, big question time.
All right.
If you could alter the space-time continuum and give young Pete McCall one piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy real estate or buy Apple? Honestly, I'm at that phase right now where it seems like everybody, other person I know has like a rental property or manages an Airbnb. And I'm like going, shit, I missed out on that. Part of that's due to my divorce, but that's a whole nother podcast. That's a whole nother conversation.
That's right.
But if I could go back into the late 1990s, I would tell young Pete McCall, either buy Apple, buy Amazon, or buy real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. Any of the three would put you in a pretty strong financial situation, right?
If you bought Apple in 1997 and you held it to today, say you bought $10,000 worth of Apple in 1997, and I didn't have $1,000 at that time. I was like 24, 25 years old. But if you had bought $10,000 worth of Apple in 97, it'd probably be worth like maybe $4.5 million today.
Oh my gosh.
Just from all the growth and the stock splits. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. But for anybody, and I tell this to the young personal trainers I work with in the 100% seriousness, one of the best things I did in my early 20s was start my 401k. So that when I was a personal trainer in my late 20s and early 30s, 20% of every one of my training sessions went into my 401k account. And that really is, I cannot, if you're a young coach, if you're a young trainer and you're starting your career, I know that the inflation right now is gnarly, but any money that you can save today is going to pay massive dividends 20, 30 years from now. The investments I started in the late 90s are definitely, I started investing in the late 90s and, I'm not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's paid off. I can definitely,
absolutely,
it's worth the outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always reference a book called Profit First. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's fantastic. Think the envelope system for your fitness business. But even if you're not a business owner, if you're a personal trainer, you still own yourself. You are your own business to some degree. So getting in that habit of whatever you're taking home, putting a certain amount aside, like you said, for your 401k, for your retirement. You're never too young to start. And please don't wait until you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s to start doing this. Right? Start when you're young. Compound interest, my friend. Compound interest. 100%.
That really is for anybody under the age of 25 out there starting your career. Whatever you can save now, do it because I can look at my investment account now and see that it's grown over. I started it in 99 or 2000, so over 23 years. It's definitely been buy Apple.
It's important. And buy Apple.
Yeah.
Okay. Last but not least, we got our lightning round. So 4 fairly short questions. Your answer can be as long or short as you like. Number 1, I'm really interested to hear this one. You have to choose The Far Side or Calvin and Hobbes.
That's not a fair question, man. Like I said, I'm a kid of the 80s. I honestly, both my kids now are reading both my Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes books. I saved them over the years.
That's awesome.
I would say Calvin and Hobbes. I had a T-shirt in college. A day without a buzz is a day that never was, and it was Calvin. It was Hobbes holding up Calvin while Calvin was doing a funnel upside down. Was doing a beer funnel. It was a perfect. Hey, I was a frat boy. I was a frat boy in the early '90s. It was a perfect frat boy T-shirt. So I'm going to go Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, Cade, my son is he just turned 10, and so funny because he started bringing these Calvin and Hobbes books home from his library at school. We'll sit there and read them together, and I'm laughing like I'm 10 years old again. So they're hilarious.
Oh, it's great. Just stuff. The imagination of a young boy. That to me, every kid should be reading Calvin and Hobbes, especially young boys, like about your son's age. That's perfect. Love that.
Yeah, it's so fun. Okay, number 2. Talk to me about the tattoos on the inside of your arms. Talk to me about those. Those are cool.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That means you took the time to look at the Instagram, so thank you. That was good. I always like to. It's funny when I hosted my podcast, I always look for that one thing I could ask a guest like that. So I certainly appreciate that little Easter egg. No, I mentioned I have 2 daughters, and I used to take them to the gym. I would teach classes at a couple different gyms while I was freelancing as a content creator. And anytime I'd pick my daughters up from the daycare, I would hold them from my arms and they would swing from my arms. You're doing the meathead thing, your 2-year-old daughter hanging on your arms. So when they got too big and they can't swing on my arms anymore, I put my one daughter was born in 2012. That's the Chinese Year of the Dragon. And so I have a dragon tattoo on the inside of my right arm. And my other daughter was born in 2014, the Chinese Year of the Horse. And so I have a horse on the other arm. So
That's
basically
cool.
those tattoos are so that my kids, my daughters will always be hanging from my arm, and I'm going to tear up a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's why I got them. So my daughters always stay close to me. It will always be those. I mean, anybody who's a dad out there with little girls knows that your little girl is always going to be 2 or 3 years old in your mind. And
Yes.
any woman out there, just trust, no matter how successful you become, no matter what you achieve in your life as a woman, your dad is always going to look at you. If he's any man worth a sense of being a man, your dad is always going to look at you as that little 2 or 3 year old girl in that mindset. So no, those tattoos were so my little girls are with me for the rest of my life.
I love it, dude. Those were awesome. Yeah. Big family man over here. So I respect that. I just thought that was so cool. Okay. Number 3, a little bit more lighthearted. What got you into biking? What's the biking game like these days?
Well, I don't compete. I mean, in the 80s, again, I was a kid in the 80s and I got into BMX when I was maybe 13, 14 years old. And that was just what kids did. I think the movie Rad came out. The movie Rad came out in like 85 or 86. And I was into biking. Some friends and I built jumps, but that's when we really started getting into it. And so I spent my teenage years BMX racing. And that's one of the reasons why I moved out to California for college, was I had this, dream of being a professional BMX racer. But I realized pretty quickly that my future was more academic oriented than in. I went out to one race in my age class, 17 and over expert. I was was not what year? It was where was it? It was not far. I went to college in Redlands in Southern California, and Yorba Linda. I went to Yorba Linda track as an NBL track, 17 and over X. I got smoked. I raced it twice. I got so smoked. I'm like, you know what? Let me just focus on college because in order to be a pro racer, in order to be able to race, because 17 and over X is basically the level right below pro, or it was in the 80s. I don't know what it's like now. And so but I've always, I think I was, after that, it was my freshman or sophomore year of college. I got rid of my BMX bike and got a mountain bike and just started mountain biking. And unlike BMX where I raced, in mountain biking, I don't race. I just want to enjoy it. So I probably do that 2 or 3 days a week, is go out for a mountain bike ride or go out for a hike. And what I like about mountain biking to me is my dopamine rush, is my dopamine. That's my flow state. You have to read Stephen Kotler's book on the rise of Superman. Was I realized that mountain biking is a form of meditation. Doing anything hard like that, whether you're rock climbing, ice climbing, sea kayaking, stand up, whatever, anything challenging and somewhat risky like that, puts you in a flow state and is a form of meditation. So really, I mean, mountain biking to me is probably 30-50% exercise and 30 to 50% mental, is really just that kind of like that I just need that something to challenge myself. I need something to scare myself. And frankly, I need the dopamine rush of flying down the hill pretty fast. And we record this. I mean, right now, my Instagram feed is full of Red Bull Rampage. And for anybody who's ever seen it, Red Bull Rampage is where these guys are insane athletes, but they do these gnarly downhill courses. They're jumping over like 100-foot canyon gaps. They're jumping like insane. I mean, the physical performance of these athletes are absolutely, I mean, it's dangerous as hell. And I'll be very emphatic, I am not going to be riding like that in my 50s. But it's so amazing to see what some of these athletes can do, and BMX athletes too. I mean, back in the 1980s, a 540 on a half pipe ramp was thought to be the height of human performance. And now you have, some of these BMX athletes are doing amazing. I mean, they're doing bike flips. It's insane what they're doing. Yeah. And so literally my Instagram feed is probably 20% fitness models, because I'm a guy and because I follow fitness. It's probably about 20% rugby, because I follow a couple of different rugby teams, a couple of different strength coaches in the rugby and other coaches in rugby. I've coached high school rugby on and off over the years. Okay. It's probably 20% BMX and like mountain biking stuff. It's about 10 to 20% bulldog stuff. And then I think the rest of it's like dancers, because my daughter's like watching like dancers. And so I have a very eclectic Instagram feed. But what I love about mountain biking is it keeps me young, right? Like some people, like you may have played basketball. It looks like you have a basketball behind you. So you may have played high school basketball. And for you going out and playing pickup on the weekends, no matter what age you are, you still feel like you're 16 years old banging it in this high school gym. And I think, my advice for anybody out there is, as you're going through the aging process, again, I'm 51 years old, having something, whether it's biking, skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding, skiing, playing pickup basketball, having something, a sport like that you can carry with you throughout your life. I mean, that's one of the reasons why. I mean, I look around, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm 51 years old. And I think that's partly because I've been working in gyms for my entire career, and in the gyms, everybody looks the same. I mean, everybody else is getting older, not me.
Yeah.
But also too, I fundamentally, there's no way to quantify this, and there's no way to get any data on it. But I fundamentally believe if you have a sport that you love or an activity that you love, and you do it throughout your lifetime, that keeps you mentally healthy, and that keeps you just fit. It gives you a reason for being active. And so for me, mountain biking is that. For you, it might be basketball. For somebody else, it might be snow skiing. But I really, for longevity and long-term, kind of the long-term athletic development for Gen Pop, just finding some sort of activity that you can do throughout your life, I think is key, is critical.
Absolutely, man. Okay, man. Last but not least, what's next for Pete McCall? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Anything?
I'm not writing any more books right now. No, I say that because it's like, for anybody that's ever, I mean, it's kind of like having a baby. You kind of go through it. It takes about the same amount of time as like the gestation period. It takes about 8 to 12 months to go through all the research and put it all together. Things like that. But really, it's just for what's next. I'm just doubling down. I'm focused on my job with EōS Fitness. We're in a rapid growth mode. We're opening up, a number of clubs around the country, and frankly, I gotta get better at my job. I mean, we have 1,200 personal trainers for us, and I just want to be good at supporting them. I really want to help us grow and want to help us get to where we get to, because one of the cool things I like about what we're doing at EōS is we're a very affordable gym. We're HVLP, high value, low price. And so we're making fitness accessible. We're going into markets that maybe haven't had gyms like this before. We go into former big box stores. So if that Walmart shuts down in your town, you're in one of our markets, we might be going in there. Seriously, we're in a couple former Walmarts. We're in a couple former that's where we go. We go into former big box stores. And I'm after being a freelancer for a number of years and doing a lot of consulting work, I really just am enjoying being a member of an organization, being a member of a team. And I want to learn, figure out how to learn and grow and support my team the best I can.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, Pete, it's been amazing to chat with you today, learn more about you. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great work you're doing?
If they're interested in seeing the occasional mountain biking thing, and I am going to start doing more fitness stuff again. And I'm also starting to play pickleball. I have to admit that, I am enjoying. I mean, come on, I'm in San Diego, and most women my age are playing pickleball. So being a single guy, I got to go there. It's an active sport and everything else. Where am I going with that? Oh, so I would be starting to post more content. But it's Pete McCall. I have to look at my Instagram. It's Pete McCall Fitness. Hold on one second. I'll tell you.
Don't worry about it. I'll find it.
I'll put it up there. Yeah. So Pete McCall Fitness. I don't have a website anymore, but just the books I have out are Smarter Recovery. That's by Human Kinetics. I have Ageless Intensity, again by Human Kinetics, and I have Smarter Workouts. So all three of those Smarter Workouts teaches you how to design workouts for metabolic conditioning, mobility, and strength training. And then Ageless Intensity goes into how to use exercise to maintain your youth and mitigate the aging process. And then Smarter Recovery goes into what should we be doing after training. So if people buy all three of those books from Amazon, best deal out there, that'll teach you everything you need to know to be able to be healthy and productive in the long term. And a lot of my resources go back to the Soviet methodology. So I'm a big geek the Soviet methodology. I just try to apply that. But just Instagram and Amazon right now for the books are the best places people can go.
I love it, man. I'll make sure I get those links in the show notes. And again, Pete, this was awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for your time. And for listeners out there, thanks for letting me spend some of your day with you. Appreciate it.